we have a pretty good group so far. So we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and kick things over to Brian Steinloggy with Choice Solutions.
Hey, thanks, Ellie, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining today. For those of you that are customers, we thank you for the partnership. We value it. And also, too, for those of you who might be prospects that we haven't had the chance to work with, we thank you for taking some time today to learn more about some of the solutions that we have the pleasure and privilege of being able to represent. Real quick, I'm going to high level just cover for some of those who are not familiar with Choice about who we are. Said we're going to hit a couple slides real quick, hand it over to the smart guys, the security guys, about what you guys came to not only obviously get a nice stake, but learn about some really important tools that we need to be looking at in our environments. So who's Choice and where we serve? Choice Solutions was originally founded back in 1986, and really it was on two premises of our CEO was founded on doing the right thing and treating others like we want to be treated. And so that's really been the hallmark of what we do and how we serve. We get a chance to, like I said, we have offices all across the Midwest and Southeast, but because of our expertise of our team and the talent that we've earned opportunities since 2015, like 750 customers across 45 states. And so it's been like I said, it's not just in the Midwest and Southeast where we're at, but also too, just like I said, all across the country. So we thank you for those opportunities. Really what we're doing is that we've never seen 4 generations in the workforce. Some of those are high tech, some of those are low tech, but the truth of the matter is all of them are users and all of them want the productivity where they want, when they want the high speed access. But we're working in partnership with businesses who want to attract and retain that key talent. They also too want to make sure that their team members are engaged and productive, but most importantly, it's got to be secure. And so all the customers that we're working with are somewhere on this cloud transformation. Some of them have already moved maybe Office 365, maybe they've moved their email, maybe they're using a UCaaS. Some of them are using, maybe some on-prem security solutions, but we come alongside them. All of them are trying to get rid of the complex, costly, rigid technologies to more the, I call it simple, secure, and automated. The kind of flexible architecture that the cloud or the hybrid provides them, and tool sets and services that kind of help support that. All the clients, like I said, that we work with, they have IT investments, and what they tell us is that they're looking for a trusted partner that can come alongside. Like I said, we don't do all things for all people, but we do bring expertise, and we partner with you to bring ideas kind of as a trusted advisor, just like we're doing today and working with Jason and his team at ConnectWise, bringing some ideas to you of things that you need to consider. A lot of times when we're working with people, it's either going to reaffirm what they're already doing, or it's going to give them some ideas of things to consider and to evaluate as they move forward. What we do, like a lot of VARs, we help with the acquisition of next generation platforms, as far as from whether it's hardware, software, different infrastructure pieces, security pieces, and technologies. But we also have a team of professional services, world-class engineers and consultants that can help assess, design, support, deploy those technologies, where we're different from a lot of other organizations that we actually have a managed services team. A lot of our clients are telling us that there's gaps. Maybe they have a gap in knowledge, maybe they have a gap in expertise, and they're having a hard time retaining key talent in a certain area. So what we do is we have a managed services team that can come alongside and take our team tools and technologies and identify what that gap is. Is that a short-term or long-term deal? And can we bring some of our expertise and help you fill that gap? Some of them, maybe it's like I said, like we're talking about today with some security technologies that they've tried to bring that in-house and have struggled mightily in doing it. And so we've been able to bring solutions like ConnectWise to them to be able to help fill that gap. Some of them it's managing the infrastructure, managing their Citrix environments, which are some very complex, maybe architectures that they grow and scale. And so that team kind of fits that gap right there in that in helping them serve their clients. Our CEO recently just put out a blog, and if you are starting to evaluate managed service providers like Choice Solutions or others, he put out a blog of 25 things that you want to make sure that you're evaluating when you're looking at that. And low price should not be the first one on that list. And so, like I said, if that's something you're interested, please let us know in the survey, and we're happy to share that blog out. But here's just a couple of them: stability, staff and team, processes, automation. How are they leveraging that? Are they just trying to throw bodies at a solution? Because when things go bump and you have a security exposure, how quickly can they help with some of those automated technologies to help identify, mitigate, and actually eventually just to resupply? But that's to 7 by 24. So I'm going to hand this over to one of our information security managers. Chris Watson can't talk this morning, but Chris is basically one of those trusted advisors that brings us a value add, whether you're just buying standard technologies from us like Citrix or Nutanix or Microsoft. He's still a resource that you have access to. Some of you other customers that are using us for managed services, he's a key resource that you engage with on a daily and weekly basis. So Chris, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. Like Brian said, I lead up our security practice here. And one of the things I really wanted to highlight is a layered approach. We're not an all or nothing. And we understand that companies and organizations, small, large, huge enterprises are on different maturity levels and different spots in the maturity model as far as adopting security practices. Some of that's driven by regulation. Some of that's driven by, now we're seeing a lot more driven by cyber insurance riders and things like that. So we're able to talk to and speak to different layers of security as well as, well, what makes sense for your organization today. And it just sort of dovetails seamlessly with our managed services. We believe that there shouldn't be a separation between your infrastructure team and your security approach, that they should interact and mutually support each other. So awesome. And these are just some of our, and I'll let Brian speak to some of these as well, but some of our strengths and how we operate as a managed services company. One of the things definitely want to highlight is we are maintaining a SOC 2 Type 2 certification, which is something that just says, hey, we do what we say we do, and we do it, to protect our customers through operational excellence.
And these are just some that highlight some of the strategic technology partners that we have a chance to work with, and ConnectWise being one of those. So Chris, I'll let you go ahead and introduce Jason, and we'll go ahead and get moving forward.
Sure. So you saw a lot of those operational things, and one of those things we always run into and hear about in security space is, single pane of glass. How can I get all this information in one place at one time? So whether that's an EDR solution or an MDR solution, or maybe it's your firewall logs, a SIM is what's going to bring all that together and add that correlative aspect. So I'll turn it over to Jason from ConnectWise, and away we go.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Let me share my screen here. Okay, everybody see that okay?
Not yet.
Maybe if I click the share button, it will work. There we go. How about that?
Looks great.
All right. Okay, so about 30 minutes. Hey, everybody. My name is Jason Mcnew. I've been in IT and tech for about 25 years. I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force. I spent a bunch of years at the White House Communications Agency at Camp David. I had a presidential access clearance. So I spent a lot of time working in buildings with no windows, surrounded by barbed wire and machine guns and that kind of stuff. And for the first couple of years, I don't know, 5-6 years I was at Camp David, I was the help desk at Camp David, which was interesting times. In 2017, I founded Stronghold Cybersecurity, and I was doing mainly Nist and Smb consulting with the Defense Industrial Base. Worked with probably 50, 60 different defense contractors. I have a Master of Professional Studies from Penn State in Information Sciences, Cybersecurity, and I'm a CISSP. So ConnectWise brings me in as a subject matter expert to work with our partners and talk with their clients about cybersecurity. So we have 30 minutes to go over a couple of subjects here. Top security concerns for SMBs. Most of the attendees here, including the MSPs, are going to be small to mid-sized businesses. And that's where ConnectWise's area of expertise is, because most of the people we're protecting ultimately are small to mid-sized businesses. We're going to talk a little bit about SIEM and MDR, what you need to know about those things. And what managed threat protection means, some MDR solutions, a little bit of talk about compliance and regulations. And then we're going to talk about security risk assessments. And all of this is going to be kind of high level. This isn't an engineering level presentation. This is going to be more geared towards decision makers and some technical people. So we're not going to go too crazy on the technical stuff. SMB security concerns. So all organizations are being targeted and they're mainly by financially motivated actors. And we still hear from time to time, people are saying, well, I'm not a target because I'm too small. And unfortunately, that's just not true. Everything's a target. So if your data is useful to you, or if it has any value to you, then that means that fact can be exploited and then used against you in order to extract money from you. And that's exactly what's happening. And they're completely indiscriminate about the targets that they hit. And kind of the analogy that I like to make here is imagine a whale swimming the ocean eating krill, right? I think it's a blue whale that eats krill, right? They just swim around and eat krill all day, kind of indiscriminately. They're just vacuuming up the ocean for krill. You're the krill, period. And they're going to vacuum you up. So we're going to talk about Verizon's data breach investigations report. And this is something that nerds like me wait for every single year. We can't wait to get our hands on this thing. It's like the halftime show at the Super Bowl, right? It's usually around 100 pages, 120 pages, I think it is this year. And you can get through it in a couple of sits. And I would recommend, if anybody's interested in security, to grab this thing and then read this. But in any case, we can see here that the top threats are credentials, phishing, exploit vulnerabilities, botnets, that kind of stuff. This is some of the data that's broken down in here. So there's four key paths that Verizon's identified here. And this is credential theft. Stealing usernames and passwords is pretty easy, especially using social engineering. I know because I've done it during white hat penetration testing. Phishing is, you can always guarantee that some percentage of the people in an organization are going to click on phishing emails and make bad decisions. And then exploit vulnerabilities, you have machines that are not patched. So once you phish somebody, they have an unpatched vulnerability, boom, you get in. And then botnets. A botnet is when you have command and control of, say, 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 computers that are infected, and then use all these computers to attack another computer in a distributed denial of service attack or something like that. That's kind of what a botnet means. So let's talk about a couple of the security concepts that are in the Verizon's threat report. The first thing is going to be an asset, and an asset's anything in the company that has value, right? And since we're talking about cybersecurity, mainly we're talking about your data, and data that you don't want to get stolen, or you don't want it leaked, or you don't want it deleted, or you don't want it modified or anything like that. But it's a data-driven world these days, and data is king, and you don't want your data. Your data is going to be your main asset, especially if it's intellectual property, customer-based information, proprietary information, anything PII, PHI, particularly that stuff, cardholder data, defense data, those sorts of things. You do not want those things to get ripped off. They definitely have value. A threat is anything that has the potential to damage an asset. And threats could come from, a variety of sources, not necessarily just malicious humans. It could be, for example, a major internet outage. If you remember, there was a problem. I can't remember which one of the authentication mechanisms earlier this year, but it took out a bunch of Facebook, and people were not able to get into buildings and all kinds of odd things. So sometimes there's cascading negative consequences from a technical failure, and that can be a threat as well. Threat actors, those are persons or organizations, and those could be internal or external. Most of the time, as far as the SMB space goes, the biggest concerns are going to be external actors, particularly advanced persistent threats and those types of things. But then the threat actor that has the greatest impact would be internal. So the internal threat has the most ability to do the most damage if they are so inclined. A vulnerability is openings or weakness in a system. Think of like an unlocked window or an unlocked door or something like that. If you're missing a patch or you have outdated firmware or something like that. An exploit, that is the process by which a threat actor is going to, it's a piece of malware that's designed to exploit something, like WannaCry. Remember the North Korean worm that spread around. It started in the Eastern Hemisphere, thankfully, and we were able to patch it before it got here too much. But that's a prime example of an exploit. They'd taken a piece of code that was leaked by the NSA, and then they weaponized it, wrapped it in a worm, and then attached it to, I think, some ransomware. If that was better executed, they could have made way more money off of it. And then there's ransomware as a service, of course, which I think everybody knows what that is these days. I'm not going to get into that too much. So according to the Verizon threat report, these are the top 21, the 2021 top threat actor profiles, and there's top 5 groups that are active here. And I'm not just going to sit and then read these. We'll hand the slides out to anybody who wants them after the fact as a PDF. But the thing that you have to keep in mind is that the TTPs, which are the tactics, techniques, and procedures that each of these groups use, are something that's tracked very carefully by organizations like MITRE and ConnectWise for that reason, for that matter. And what this does is this is sort of like a post-mortem on an attack, and it allows us to identify threat actors tend to follow the same types of tactics, use the same type of exploits. So by looking at what they do, we're able to fingerprint kind of who they are, whether they come from Eastern Europe or Russia or China or North Korea or Iran or from one of our allies or they're internal or whatever. There are dozens and dozens of these advanced ATPs that are being tracked by various organizations. And again, this can't be overstated. Most of the time they're looking for money. Most of the time, not all the time though, but most of the time it's just financial. They're looking for finance. Ransomware as a service, as a production, it's organized crime, basically. And some of these threat actors, they're pretty good at protecting their business models, and they're careful about who they're selling their ransomware as a service to. And they tell them that you can't target anything that's going to attract the interest of the FBI or the DOJ or, the federal agencies and that kind of stuff. There's different statistics on this. This particular statistic comes from Sophos, but on average, 65% of the data is restored after paying the ransom. So it's a real crapshoot, right? And there's different schools of thought on this. I know that the law enforcement, they always like to say, well, don't pay, don't pay, don't pay. And okay, I understand that, but let's say you're the sole proprietor of a small business you built up from nothing, and your options are either to try to pay this or to cease, lose all of your wealth overnight. You have to make that decision whether or not you want to pay that or not. And that's not, that's really not shoes that anybody wants to be in. This is the average. These are keep going up. The average approximate cost of these organizations, and again, all these statistics are in the DBIR, so I'm not going to sit and just read the slides, but the cost in these things keeps going up, and it's crazy. And again, that's one of the reasons why you need to have cyber insurance on top of all the technical controls. Okay, everyday challenges for SMBs. Now, we talk about the SMB space, the small to mid-sized business space, as defined by the Small Business Administration. Pretty much everybody attending here, including Choice Solutions, is going to be an SMB by definition. And it's not getting any easier for SMBs to protect their interests when it comes to cybersecurity. One of the biggest challenges is differentiating cybersecurity from IT. And one of the things that I always explain to pretty much anybody who will listen is that IT is a service delivery issue and cybersecurity is risk management. IT is making sure printers could print, people could email, they could move information around and do their jobs. And cybersecurity is making sure all those things happen without unacceptable risk to the business. Us getting robbed, getting in the paper, people ending up in jail, those sorts of things. So what I do as a CISSP is probably fairly close to what a lawyer does or what a CPA does, which is reduce some type of risk exposure, whether it's financial exposure or tax exposure or a cyber IT-borne business risk in my case. It can be very difficult to manage cybersecurity with competing priorities. You have so many things to do. Security is a cost center. It's not easy. It's not cheap. There's the complexity of shifting to a remote workforce. Obviously, COVID accelerated that. That movement was already underway, but when people were working from home, that presents new challenges. And what you're hearing more and more now is the whole concept of zero trust environment because of that. Poor communications between organizations and their managed IT service providers. Choice Solutions, of course, is a SOC 2 Type 2 audited organization. And when MSPs are going through, this is something I'm absolutely an advocate for, and I applaud them for doing it. Getting SOC 2 Type 2 would be like losing 40 pounds. It's hard. It takes time, it takes dedication, but it's absolutely worth it. And once these organizations have gone through that, they wouldn't go back. But this makes them well suited to deal with everything that I'm talking about in this briefer, the fact that they've undertaken the effort to go SOC 2 Type 2. Poor cybersecurity skill sets within the organization. This is especially a problem for the SMB space now. And this is kind of my opinion, but here's why, is that big tech has figured out big tech has basically figured out that they can poach people from the Midwest or from rural Pennsylvania where I live. I live literally in a cornfield, right? And it's making talent even more expensive for SMBs. So, I'm in South Central Pennsylvania, and there's SMBs here that might want to hire, somebody like me, for example, and they find that now that they're competing with companies out of Southern California or Texas or Florida or Washington, D.C. or whatever. So it's driving the cost of talent up. Their ability to accept, their willingness to accept, cyber talent from pretty much anywhere. Ad hoc business continuity and disaster recovery efforts. You need to have policies and procedures and governance, some form of governance in place to manage your cybersecurity, just like you do with your safety program. A little bit behind on my slides, so I need to pick up the pace a little bit. Again, we'll send out the slides. I'm not going to read this one. You can take a screenshot of the QR code, and this will take you to our cyber research unit, and it will tell you about some of the top threat actors. These are who the bad guys and girls you need to worry about. We're only human. This is the truth. A person is involved at the center of most security events. And again, I know this empirically because when we do penetration testing, which I've done in the past, and penetration testing is when you hire somebody like me to break into your systems, we find usually it's easier to get through the humans than the technology. Most of the time, we'll find the technology on the perimeter anyway is fairly tight. Things are patched up. But then we find internally they're not training users. There's no multi-factor authentication. Email's not configured correctly and those sorts of things. But if you have enough people, if I send out 10,000 phishing emails, it's almost like marketing in that I could get, and not me, but I mean the threat actors could get fairly reliable results in terms of numbers doing that. So I'm not going to sit and read the numbers. But there's a couple of different things, the SMBs that you can do to significantly reduce. And the big thing, the most important things, in my opinion, train your people, and then secondly, use multi-factor authentication everywhere that you possibly can. That will thwart a lot of the attacks just right there. And you can pay for training, and there's all kinds of options available. But if you're in a pinch and you have a small organization and need some type of training that's free and robust, I like the DoD Cyber Awareness Challenge. You could look up the 2022 DoD Cyber Awareness Challenge. Have all of your people take that and then print out the certificate and then give it to you. It's great training. It doesn't cost a dime. They update it every single year. The only bad thing about it is it doesn't have any tracking mechanism. So if you have 100 employees, there's no way to track who's taken it and who hasn't. But your people should definitely be trained. Most data thieves are organized professionals. Again, I'm not going to read this. Again, I'm going to get into my next slide here. Other considerations to consider. Study the Nist cybersecurity framework. And Nist is the National Institute for Standards and Technology. And one of the best things about it is that it's funded by tax money. So the frameworks are free, right? It doesn't cost any money to download these. And when we say a framework, think of something like the National Electric Code is a framework of sorts, right? When you go into residential and commercial buildings, you see the electric is done all the same way, and it's all very repeatable process. It's very mature, right? And that's all, for safety reasons. And that gives you an idea what a framework is. And we're going to get into the Nist cybersecurity framework in a couple more slides here. And create and practice an incident response plan. If you like, you can email me. My email address is at the end of the slides here, and I will send you one for free that I got from the Defense Security Service a couple of years ago that maps to NIST. You need to regularly review your security procedures. You can't this is not set it and forget it. Once you have your policies and procedures, you need to update them every year. And Choice Solutions will be able to tell you that, again, because they're, SOC 2 Type 2. Keep an eye on the Cybersecurity Information Security Agency's ransomware notices coming out. That's kind of like, those tones that go off on your phone when you have adverse weather coming, or there's been some other type of legal event that you need to know about. Think of CISA and cybersecurity that way. If there's something you need to know, then they're going to let you know. And then also take a look at the ConnectWise Security Trust and Compliance site. And I've got a couple of links to that. And ConnectWise has become a player in disseminating information in the IT community. And again, most of our clients are SMBs, small to mid-sized businesses, the vast majority of them. So our information is going to be tailored to you and the risks that are associated with operating a small to mid-sized business. With all that said, so we've talked about some of the threats, and I think really to a large degree, I'm just kind of regurgitating what you hear in the news, but it's definitely true. And the most important things takeaway there is that everything is a target. Again, like I said, imagine the krill in the ocean, and the threat actors are like the whales. They're just vacuuming it up. They just eat it all, anything and everything. And then secondly, doing nothing is not an option and hoping that the whale doesn't find you. They're going to find you eventually. So you have to have a plan in place. So we're going to talk about some protective technologies, SIEM and MDR. And a SIEM is security information and event management. And here's how I'm going to explain what SIEM does. SIEM ingests logs from different machines on your network. And you have, and not just the machines, it could be software, Office 365, domain controllers, firewalls, antivirus, all these things generate logs. And these logs are not intended for humans. They're intended for other machines. They're not human friendly. And you could get hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of logs per day. ConnectWise, we ingest billions of events per month on behalf of our customers. So imagine for a second that you have, a building in every single state in the country. You've got 50 buildings, okay? And then you have 100 employees in each building. And these buildings operate 24/7, 365. And then all those employees each have a fob, an access fob to get in and out of the building, right? So you have 5,000 people, 3 shifts, and they're coming and going in 50 different buildings, and they can access different areas in the building. Now, so you're creating events. Every time somebody swipes their fob to come in the building or leave the building, they're creating an event, right? What would you do with all this information? Now, imagine that you put it all in screens in an operations center. You had people sitting there looking at it. It's not going to make any sense. It's going to be useless, right? This is kind of what the events on a machine on your computers do. They generate all this information, but you have to have some way to ingest it and then parse it and then do something with it. Now, imagine I'm taking all this information from my 50 buildings. Let's hypothetically say that Bob enters 2 buildings at once, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, right? And then the system generates the alerts, and then humans watching it, they're not going to see that. They're not going to know. You need some type of a correlation engine to correlate those events and then identify that as anomalous. Obviously, a human being cannot enter the same building at the same time in 2 different states. So that's something will be an anomaly. Or if Bob is trying to repeatedly enter the same building off of his shift or something like that. So imagine this is what I'm describing at a high level here, sort of a building automation and control system, building access control system. So what SIEM would do is take all of these events and then correlate all these things and then drill it down into an event that a human needs to know about. And the reason that you need this for auditing and compliance requirements, there's all kinds of compliance requirements coming down, full visibility of everything that's happening with the network. Forensics in particular, the SIEM is going to tell you if there's an event and there's a penetration, you could go back into the SIEM logs and then see what happened. And then it also dramatically, when you're SIEMing, we're feeding the information from the SIEM into our EDR and our other things, that's going to dramatically reduce the amount of time that it takes to identify threats, which is really important. This is a slide on how Perch works, how our SOC works. I'm not going to sit here and read this. Just I think the analogy that I made kind of it kind of helps you with that. But the main thing to keep in mind here is that Perch is backed by Security Operations Center, which is 24/7, 365. And there are humans that are watching the events that are coming out of this correlation engines, so that they know when they have to actually take action. But Perch will ingest logs from network devices, workstations, and servers, work from home employees, crowd and integrations, all this stuff. So imagine each of those things is, again, the building in each state and then the users in each state. It's watching all these things and then ingesting that and then correlating it. And then when there's something that requires a human action, then the human is going to get alerted so they know what they want to do. So here's a little bit of the differences in the capabilities between SIEM and EDR, detection and response, managed detection and response. SIEM is a detective control, more or less, right? And a detective control is kind of like, think of like a camera. A video camera is a detective control, right? Or a sensor or a motion sensor inside of a building. The video camera is mainly a detective control. It can see what's going on, and it can protect an entire area, right? But it doesn't actually do anything. It's a detective control. EDR, MDR, and EDR, managed detection and response, that is a protective control. It's a detective control and a protective control. So not only can it detect an adverse event or a break-in or something like that, it could also do something about it actively. The technology itself has ways to reverse what the malicious logic or malicious actors have done on these machines, and then alert our SOC that something is happening so they can take direct intervention when it's actually happening. And I would compare this, frankly, to NORAD, right? North American Air and Space Command missile defense. You want humans watching this. Just having computers watching missiles comes in. It's not good enough. You have to have humans in your SOC, and we have over 160 of them. And one other big difference, since I'm still on the slide, is that EDR and MDR focus on endpoints, whereas SIEM focuses on other things besides just that. Traditional antivirus, traditional AV is dead. When you think of traditional antivirus, you think of it's basically, it doesn't really have much in terms of pattern recognition. It's more just pattern matching, right? It was simple pattern matching. You would fingerprint a piece of malicious logic and then build a big database of these fingerprints and then cross-reference them. And then when there was a match, then it would try and quarantine whatever this piece of malicious logic was. It doesn't work anymore. That's the 90s security model. MDR includes real-time monitoring and detection, and it's behavior-based. So it has a component of intelligence in it that can detect anomalous events and then actually take an action after the fact, or during the fact, rather, not after the fact, excuse me. Again, legacy antivirus just cannot do what modern endpoint protection like Sentinel-1 can do at all. They're just not even close. I've got a couple slides here that I'm a little bit behind time-wise, so I'm going to go through these. These are just a couple of quick animations that show what happens when MDR actually responds to an anomalous event. Real-time file analysis can actually analyze the code. And MDR, when WannaCry came out, Sentinel-1 was able to catch that on day one without even any, it already had the intelligence built into it to stop that when it came out. So none of the customers that had Sentinel-1 were affected by that. And this is what Sentinel-1 and Bitdefender do. This is a slide again for our cyber research unit. We now have our own cyber research unit. And in addition, we're ingesting billions of data points per month, and we're able to distill that down into intelligence for our community. So the ConnectWise Cyber Research Unit is really up and coming as far as being a source of information for cybersecurity. So I've got about 5 minutes left to go through security and risk assessments, because you don't know what you don't know. At a high level here, these are kind of the components of a well-designed cybersecurity solution for your business. And the first thing they need you to do is an assessment. And most small to mid-sized businesses have not had any kind of a cybersecurity assessment. And I highly, highly recommend that you get with Choice Solutions and then get one done, because this is, like I said, you don't know what you don't know. So the first step here is a security assessment, right? Before we can even think about doing some of these other things. So again, we're going to use another analogy. And for this analogy, I'm going to compare cybersecurity to a house, right? Because we all either have a house or live in an apartment or something like that. And you have things to keep bad people out or unwanted things out, right? So I'm going to go a little bit quick through these, but think about doors and windows. You have locks. You may have an alarm. I think you have about a dozen things here that were sort of mapped to some different controls. You may have a dog. I have a dog here. Her name is Socks. You might have police. We don't have police enforcement where I live. Neighborhood watch. I don't have a neighborhood. We don't have that. Insurance. Doorbell cameras are good. For defense, you may have a baseball bat or some other type of thing. Yard signs. Those are to warn predators away. Motion sensors. Educate your family on threats, right? So remember, before I was talking about the Nist cybersecurity framework, the CSF. So we've kind of taken these different types of controls and then mapped them to things under the Nist CSF, right? And the Nist CSF has 5 families: identify, protect, detect, respond, and then recover, right, for a complete cybersecurity program. Now think about this. Look at the way we have these mapped now. Protect, doors and windows, locks, education, yard signs, protect. Detect, your alarm is a detective control. Motion sensor is a detective control. Doorbell cameras, a detective control. Neighborhood watch. And then respond, the dog. The dog is going to both detective and respond, right? Insurance is a response. The police are going to be a response, may also be a detective control if they see something going on. A baseball bat would be to respond. And then here's our identify control under the CSF. When we start thinking about our cybersecurity program or protecting our home, the first thing we need to think about are what is it that we want to protect? We want to protect our family and our pets first, maybe our collectibles, family heirlooms, documents and valuables, electronics, computers, and these things that may correlate, for example, to data in your environment, in your small to mid-sized business. And then lastly, we have recover here, right? And recover is going to be, what do we do after the fact, right? And what I've been telling people for years is that your network is basically, imagine a house sitting on the coast of Florida, right? You know what's going to happen. It might not be this year. It might not be next year. It might be 5 years from now, but someday that storm, that Cat 3 or that Cat 5 is going to come in right where you are. And you need to have an incident response plan in place, which would be like you have your water in your basement, maybe have some MREs meal ready to eat. You have the plywood to put over the window, candles, you have an evacuation route, those kinds of things. And then in that case, recover would be, your insurance, emergency equipment, backup systems, and so on and so forth. So this is a way to kind of correlate identification and assessment with your house. So we need to do all these things for your business. So we know, we know what we need to protect. That's the first thing that we need to know. And that is just so important because I don't know how many times I've dropped a vulnerability scanner on a network. Some of them are pretty big. And I usually found a delta of somewhere between 50 to 80% between what clients thought they had and what they actually had. So I would see that they'll tell me they have 500 items on their network and really there's like 750. So that identify piece is very, very important. I have just a minute left to talk about compliance here. And again, Choice Solutions, they are compliant with SOC 2 Type 2, so they're going to understand the concept of compliance. I worked with CMMC a lot, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. I think a lot of you listening are familiar with HIPAA. That's a compliance form. ITAR is that's arms exports. SOX, that came out of Enron, if you remember, GLBA, contractual requirements. So you might have these different compliance requirements depending on whether you're in, you could be in finance, or you could be in healthcare, or you could be in defense or whatever. So you need to take a look at these compliance requirements and then take a look at these advanced protective technologies, things like SIEM and MDR and patch and vulnerability management, these other things, and then map these together. And then, this slide here I think is very useful. You need to have policy, process, and then technology in order to address all these things. And technology is some of the things that we're talking about: process, incident response plan, change management, so on and so forth. Policies, acceptable use policy, bring your own device, work from home, so on and so forth. So you need to have the right mixes of people, process, and then technology in order to have your cybersecurity program. Let's see, I'm out of time, but real quick, the United States government had some interesting responses to the Colonial Pipeline. And there's more federal regulation that is coming down that's intended to kind of bring this problem under control a little bit. And they don't always have the authority to do it directly. So the thing I'm reminded of is the double nickel in the 1970s, right? The 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. They wanted to save gas, so they made the states change the speed limit. So if they can't do it directly, they're going to find a way to do it indirectly. Okay, I'm just a minute over. Do we have any questions for me? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If somebody... Oh, whoops. Okay, it's over here. Time for Q&A if anybody has any questions, either in the chat or live. or are we just moving on from here?
Yeah, well, like I said, the if you do have any questions or anything like that for Jason and or Chris, please do post that in there. Also, too, you could attach that to the survey. But we appreciate Jason. Thank you for running us through all that ConnectWise can do, especially in the SMB space. One of the things that for some of the clients on there, if you already have a SIM, obviously sometimes you're in contractual engagements with them, but when those times come for renewal, please reach out. We'd love to at least have the conversation. Just say, said it's either going to reaffirm what you're already doing, or it's going to open up questions on how it can benefit you. Like I said, for us, it's hard for organizations. And when I say SME, I'm usually thinking from 500 to 3,000. It's really not large enterprise, but do you have that kind of 160 people in your SOC that are literally looking at these alerts and being able to act on those and keeping eyes on? And so those are things that we believe in the value that that ConnectWise brings, but also to Chris referenced some of the things that we're doing on the advanced endpoint. And so that's another thing is say if you guys are a larger enterprise on here and you already have a SOC, is that one thing we'd love to talk to you about is potentially like a Palo Alto Cortex XDR. Like Jason said, antivirus is dead. It is no valued benefit. It cannot remediate. So even we'd love to have a conversation maybe on what we believe is best practices on large Citrix environments and why we use Cortex in there to prevent malware from being able to propagate. Also, too, another one's called Huntress. Basically, Huntress allows it. Basically, we can scan your guys' environment and we can help you see if there's any remnants of malware. All of us want to believe that we're safe and sound, but we have some tools that we can run a no-cost POC for you guys to be able to show. So we'd love to be able to show if we can, if you have some interest in ConnectWise or Cortex or even to a Huntress, we'd love to be able to at least have a follow-up conversation. I know Ellie is going to post a poll here with some just generic questions. So Chris, any closing thoughts?
No, I think you covered it, but likewise, love to have the conversation with any of you. And one thing I love about these is we are scalable. We work with everything from 2 or 3 doctor, private practices, all the way up to large enterprise customers. So looking forward to having those conversations with you in the future and presenting that value prospect.
Absolutely. So Jason, Chris, thank you guys so much for your time today. On behalf of our organization, we want to thank you guys, the customers and prospects, for taking time today to learn more about some of the solutions that we have the pleasure and privilege to represent. So with that, Ellie, I think we're going to go ahead and close it out. If there's any questions that our team can be of help on, please reach out. Best to you and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.